Good day. I'm going to talk to you about thought form beings. So, thought form beings are beings that are created and maintained through thought. They are the artificial intelligence of the astrals. So, if you think about something enough, a being that doesn't actually exist while you're in the physical universe, it will manifest astrally. I believe that most thought beings manifest at the creative realms level, and then if they have enough intelligence, they can travel to different levels of being or states of being. So, religion is responsible for a lot of thought form beings that you'll be able to easily identify when you gather some experience in the astrals, just because they're so obvious. They are material beings, they're often unstable, they behave weird, and well, I'm not saying that they're beings. If I say beings, if I call them entities or beings alone, I'm not really referring to, I don't mean that they're actual entities like you and I. That's a mistake. I try not to use the term entities or beings in a way that it entails thought forms, because thought forms are not actual beings. So the religious ones are unstable because religion has unrealistic expectations as to what these beings are. They have a lot of thoughts that are put towards these beings that conflict with each other. Like Jesus, for instance, a lot of atheists might think that he's an extraterrestrial or a human illusionist, or they think that he's a big douchebag because he judges people. And there's lots of variation with the Jesus character throughout religions, and characters like Jesus at least. And that's why I think that Jesus is unstable, and that's why I don't think that I can find him, just because it's not really a being that's articulated properly. But with the devil, it's very simple. The being's just as sinister as they come. That's the idea, and that's usually how people see it. There are some odd beliefs where people think the devil is, a good being, but not enough to really destabilize the thought form or the different thought form variations of the devil. Identifying immaterial thought forms is a bit harder because immaterial beings, ones that are used to that state of being in the astrals or up and around that level, their thought form beings are harder to identify because they know how to create balanced beings, artificial beings. They know how to make them stable and behave intuitively because they know how to work with energies in that sense a lot better than we do. So a lot of times you'll find thought form beings, not a lot of times, but through experience you'll come across beings that are not so right. They seem a bit weird. After a while you might get accustomed to identifying thought forms to an extent that you can really point out these immaterial thought forms, the ones that don't really have a material form but still kind of behave programmatically or systematically. But they still have way more intuitive behaviors than a humanoid thought form being, a thought form being created by humans. Humans often not create really unstable thought form beings. Like I often come across humanoid beings that behave very oddly. It always gets me because they're not right. It's like when you see those robots that the Japanese make with the realistic face, but the face is not perfect and it makes the face look a bit deformed and creepy. Well, that's the feeling that you get from these beings. They kind of behave like entities, but they don't feel like entities at all. They don't have that entitative signature, and they have weird tics and such. And I noticed that with thought form beings, they often don't radiate any sort of obvious signature. They can actually sneak up on you and come out of nowhere. And often or not, whatever they say doesn't make any sense, or they're very limited as to what they can say. Also, you can sneak up on them because usually you can sneak up on them because they can't detect entities like an entity can. Entities are interconnected, whereas entities with a thought form, not so much. So you can sneak around these beings pretty easily. So I notice a lot of weird thought form beings. Like, some of them are only capable of staring at you. Some of them are incapable of any sort of communication, and it's very weird. Especially if they stare at you at a distance. And it's also really weird to come across a perceived being that doesn't really want to interact with you. Like, it'll say something and then it'll just take off. Or it will look at you and then it'll just take off, fly away. It's really odd to have that happen, at least with me. Usually entities feel the need to interact with me if they see me and we're both by ourselves. Also, thought form beings, they have tics. They do things over and over again. And I'm talking about the thought forms that are created from Earth civilization, the weird ones. Their form gets a bit weird. They get a bit deformed. And if you communicate beyond their programming, which is pretty much every time with the humanoid ones, they cannot respond intuitively. They might not respond at all, or they might say something that doesn't make any sense. I recently came across a demonic cloud-looking thought form. It was either one that was created poorly by an immaterial being or just a typical religious, like sulfuric cloud demonic being thing, and it just came out of nowhere, said this scrambled speech that didn't make any sense and took off, and I didn't even detect it. Like, I didn't even know it was there until it came like 2 feet in front of me. I'm sure there's cases where entities can project their consciousness into thought form beings and use it as a sort of abstracting body for a specific experience, but I don't think that's very common, at least with the thought form beings that are intentionally created to be independent beings, not any sort of vessel. And also, being inside of a thought form being and using it as a body would be kind of odd, because the body would be off doing its own thing and you'd have to put up with all of its programming. I find it amusing interacting with these thought forms because they're not really stable. You can bug them out a lot. The only reason that they're sustained and active thought forms, like functional thought forms, is because the amount of people that believe in their existence, that are continuously sustaining these thought forms with their co-creative power. There are some that are stable, that are completely independent, that certain beings have created. I don't know of any humans that can do this. I haven't heard of people who have created a system for this, who actually have any knowledge of this, but I know immaterials can create some really sustainable ones that grow in intelligence. And that's all about thought form beings. See you next time.